have no shelter to hide in at all.
My mourning transcends political agendas.
Your mourning can too. This is not about equivalency. The time has come to center the human cost of the conflict above all.
Amen. Can we stretch
our hearts
beyond what was previously imaginable? We must, if there is to be a world.
Good morning, everyone. It's Sunday, October 29th, 2023. Today's voice, Bob Harper's back with us again. Yay. Next in-person communion will be on November 12th at 1915 Chapala Street. When we meet on December 3rd, let's do our best to show love and support for young families who are new to California and the USA. And we'll share communion. Use whatever you have convenient. We will be doing this in remembrance of Jesus. Your financial contributions are making a difference. Beloved communitychurch.net is the website. On Wednesdays, we meet at 7 p.m. We have good fellowship, so be sure and come on to the same Zoom link on Wednesday night at 7. Julia has put some of the resources for contributing in the chat. Next Sunday's theme will be queerness in the Bible. This is William Blum. Ronald Reagan and his ultra-ideological comrades took office in January 1981, committed to a massive transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich. One of the pivotal ways in which they so artfully reached to this end was through huge increases in the military budget, i.e. welfare for the rich, for defense industry, friends and business associates, past, present, and future. But in order for the military-industrial intelligence complex to sell this to the American public and Congress, there had to be a fresh supply of wars, armed conflict, insurgencies, counterinsurgencies, or rumors and threats of same, and enemies, ideally the monster type, to be defended against. Next, here's Bob Harper.
Thank you, Linnea. Let me introduce Bob. Bob is back with us. He was with us last month. Just talked so much on the themes of hope and faith and joy. And so we know Bob has a lot of experience with his time being a hospice counselor through those experiences. And I'm sure we'll get more of going in depth on those today and expanding kind of what those look like for us as Bob just, continues to speak from his experience. So Bob, we just welcome you today.
Thank you, Matt, very much. And good morning, everybody. I'm going to see if I can share my screen here. What do I need to, anybody know what I need to do that? It looks like it says all participants. Wait a second.
Yeah, you should be able
oh,
to
here we
click
go.
your screen.
I got it.
Yep.
Okay. So I am a real Zoom neophyte. And okay, so can you guys see the screen that says the survival instinct?
Yes.
Okay, great. So that's the title of my message today, the survival instinct. And what I plan to do is talk about a big idea. That big idea is that civilization, humanity is meant to progress, to improve, not necessarily that it does, but that it's meant to improve and to grow in a good way. I'm going to, after that, talk about a subtle change in our spirituality, and then kind of lead into maybe talking about a couple of different things that Jesus said in a practical way that hopefully kind of tie all these ideas together. So here's my premise for today. My premise for today is this. I've been thinking a lot lately about some of the themes that we just heard in our reading and in the music. I have this nagging sense that we, meaning humanity, meaning civilization, that we have come as far as we can with our current consciousness. Now, when I use this word consciousness, I mean specifically this. I mean our understanding of ourselves, or what are we as human beings? I mean how we understand how we cooperate with each other, where we fit in the universe, what's happening in the universe, and then how we answer this question, what is the point of life? And again, I suspect that our experience and understanding of this has taken us as far as it can and can take us no farther. I believe humanity now needs a leap of consciousness, a leap in how we think about ourselves and how we understand how we cooperate with each other and what we think is happening in the universe and where we fit in it, and how we answer the question, what is really the point of this life? We need a leap forward in these things. And now here's where we, meaning me and you, come in. I further believe that this leap of consciousness will be ignited by a change, a refreshing, a different or a new spirituality. And when I use this word spirituality, I'm using it in a specific way also to mean these two things: our understanding of God and what we believe God requires of us. So let me repeat that. I think we're at a very difficult, critical point in the history of civilization. I believe we're at a point where ideas can't help us anymore. I don't think there are ideas that can help us sort through things. I think we need a leap in our understanding of what we are collectively, of what we are as people, of how we cooperate, of what the point of life is, and of what's happening in the universe. And I further believe that this leap that I'm advocating for will be ignited by a new, what's the word I'm looking for here? A new, a recharged, refocused, a unique spirituality. And I'll, of course, explain that a little bit later. Our current spirituality, it seems to me, is built around institutions. And sometimes people will say, well, religion and spirituality, they aren't really the same things. I tend to disagree with that. I think we may say I'm a spiritual person, but even at that, we tend to identify with a particular movement or particular denomination, and we tend to even think of God kind of in light of that denomination. And when we look around at how religion or spirituality is expressed in our time, we see buildings, we see churches, synagogues, temples, mosques, and we know that behind these buildings, of course, there's an infrastructure, a group of men and women who are working to care for the faithful, to keep those buildings going, perhaps to keep the group on task or on mission, and to maybe define and redefine the belief system that kind of undergirds it. I'm not in any way criticizing that. In fact, I think that religion or spirituality as institutions, I think it's actually helped humanity a lot. It's helped us progress on this growth of humanity or of civilization, because one thing it's taught us is it's taught us how to get along with larger groups of people, and it's given us a way to answer, those four things that I said make up consciousness. But again, it's time for a new, a different, a unique way to understand our spirituality to be able to go forward. So before I go on, I'd just like to stop for maybe just a second and ask if there might be any clarifying questions, if anybody might want to ask something about what I've said so far, or if what I've said so far is clear. Anybody? Okay, then I'll keep going. So here's what I'm not saying. In saying that we need a new or refreshed spirituality, I'm not talking about eliminating the differences between different religions or belief systems. I'm not talking about forming some kind of a universal church or eliminating the Bible or the institutions that we have. Again, I'm talking about a new or refreshed way of understanding our spirituality. I have to, meaning specifically those two questions. What is our understanding of God and what do we believe he requires of us? Now, I have to confess that I don't really have a good idea of what that actually will look like. In fact, I don't think it's the kind of thing that we could plan. I don't think it's the kind of thing that one person could develop an understanding of. I think what we need is something bigger than one person or bigger than one movement or denomination or belief system even. But I believe we can prepare ourselves for it. And I have some ideas about what that is. And that's the subtle change I mentioned earlier that I'll get to in a few minutes. So I want to say this leap of consciousness that I'm advocating today, humanity has experienced something like this at least once in recorded history. Martin Luther King Jr. famously said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. So in other words, the energy, the trend, the force of civilization, or let me say it differently, the trend, the energy, the force of the universe is toward a just and fair existence. So humanity, civilization, we should be moving toward a just and fair existence. And we are, I think historically we could say, slowly, again, fits and starts perhaps, making that leap or making that progress forward. Okay, but so where did this arc begin though? This arc began in the survival of the fittest. It began in brutality. It began in the powerful exploiting the weak. It began in the survival instinct. And as I said, history shows that we've made progress, growing to be accepting of larger and larger groups and of answering these questions in different ways. We've made progress, but again, there has been a time in recorded history where humanity made a big leap, like I'm saying we need right now. You may have heard this phrase before, the axial age. The axial age is a 200-year period of time, roughly 500 BCE to 300 BCE, when humanity globally experienced like an intellectual explosion. I mean, during this time, almost every major philosophical idea, which still operates in civilization today, had its birth. During this period of time that all religions had their birth or rebirth or had some kind of a renewal. And the interesting thing about it to me is that although we know that this happened, we don't know why. In other words, there isn't like a trigger event that we can find that kind of sparked it. What seems to have happened is all around the globe, almost like spontaneous fires, this explosion, this intellectual explosion, this spiritual explosion happened. It's like humanity took a big leap in consciousness. So it is possible, and it has happened in the past. One of the key things about the axial age, of course, is that people learn to cooperate in larger groups of people. So I believe that leap and that spirituality that I'm hoping for is a further leap beyond the survival instinct or beyond what was the beginning of this arc, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. To me, this is the key, that my spirituality, that our spirituality has to take us farther past the survival instinct to be able to help us become, again, the kind of civilization, the kind of humanity that our time is crying for. In a few minutes, I'm going to talk about that subtle change again, but first I want to talk a little bit more about the survival instinct. So there is an excellent Netflix documentary. It's 4 episodes long, called Chimp Empire. If you haven't seen it, I'd highly recommend it. So what it's about the chimpanzees that live in the Ngogo forest in Africa. When this group of chimps was discovered, it was the largest civilization or largest community of chimpanzees that had ever been discovered. It was 220 initially. About 2016 or so, this particular group split in two, and researchers don't really know why, but they've been studying this group now for decades. The researchers know these chimps, they've given them names, they know their story arcs, they know, what's going on in their lives, and so on. And so Netflix sent a film crew in to embedded them with the chimps for a year to film them and to, kind of show their life. It's fascinating. The documentary provides an interesting window into the survival instinct because chimpanzees are our closest relatives in the animal world in terms of DNA. We share like 98% of DNA with chimpanzees. So their behavior perhaps gives us an illustration of maybe our own or how our own could be. Now, we have to be careful, of course, about attributing like moral values or moral decisions to animals, moral choices to animals, when there's very little evidence that they do that, or that they make the same moral choice. In other words, I heard a guy explain it this way. If you were kind to an animal and an animal seemed grateful to you for it, you might tend to say, well, the animal is showing like gratitude. The guy said, so if you saved a bear from a bear trap and the bear turned around and ate you, would you say that the bear is being intolerant? And of course, we'd say no. The point only is, we sometimes think animals make moral choices that they don't necessarily. We can, though, look at the chimps in this documentary, I believe, and we can learn some things about our own behavior in terms of the survival instinct. Now, when you see these chimps, they have a very real society, a very real civilization. They have a hierarchical power structure, and chimps are able to move up and down that power structure with competition and the threat of violence. The powerful in this community, they know how to hold on to power. They know how to make the alliances to keep that power. And those who have no power, they have no choice but to obey those who have all of it, unless, of course, they themselves want to be violent. We see that they have real relationship with each other, that there are real relationship rules of how to connect with other chimpanzees and who has meaning and who doesn't have meaning. The society codifies who belongs and who doesn't belong. In other words, it provides opportunities for the people it says are winners, and it at the same time locks into roles the chimpanzees that are considered losers. Like, for instance, orphans are like at the bottom of the pecking order. So anyway, as you watch this, you get to see this act out. Now, the thing that struck me as I watched it was this: chimpanzees cannot stop being territorial. No matter what they're able to learn or how they might be able to grow and so on, they're unable to stop being territorial. And in fact, in the documentary, this actually causes a great war between these chimps. And so the first lesson I took away from it is that humans, like chimpanzees, cannot stop being territorial. We are tethered tightly to the survival instinct by this fact. And I think that's obvious. I mean, in our reading, we certainly addressed that in our reading today. The second lesson I got from it is this powerful urge to protect, to expand my own territory, is the survival instinct at work in me. So let me back up a second and kind of repeat the main part of what I'm trying to say here so I can get to kind of the practical part of it. Again, I think that in humanity, we've gone as far as we can go. And I think what's keeping us from going farther is we are tethered to the survival instinct. We are territorial, and it's difficult for us to move past that. I believe it's time for a leap of consciousness that will take us past that, that will help us understand how to cooperate with each other in a better way, that it will be fueled by or ignited by spirituality. So I want to find for myself a spirituality then that helps me move past my own attachment to the survival instinct. So what about that? What about that spirituality that helps me move away from that? So, you know, honestly, when I watched the documentary, it really impacted me deeply. And I thought a lot about, okay, what would it look like to be different? How would I get away from that? And what does like Jesus have to do with that? It seems to me that a lot of our thinking about Jesus is shaped by our institutions. You know, when we think about Jesus, we tend to think about him kind of in these ways, I think. We want to, we have maybe have an apologetic view. You know, we want to talk about the reality that Jesus lived, that he resurrected, and so on. We want to talk about salvation. Jesus died for my sins. What does this mean? We want to talk about discipleship, which often is shaped by the particular institution that we belong to. And I don't think there's anything wrong with any of that, but I do think it's time for maybe a step forward. And so I just thought about it in my own life, thinking about what would that mean to take a step forward or to approach Jesus in a new or a different kind of way. And so, as I said earlier, it's very subtle. So I hope it has some impact and meaning. But I just started thinking about, so people in the Near East, you know, relatives in the Near East, how do they understand like a great teacher or a great leader? And my sense is, and I'm certainly no expert, but my sense is that they would see that a little differently than the way I just described our approach to Jesus. That perhaps if Jesus were a guru, if I could use that word, we might think about how we might embody his teachings. And so I started to think about what would that be like? And what I thought about is, so what if we were to take like just one saying at a time, and we were to take that saying and think about how that, how I could live out that saying faithfully in my life. And then maybe from there, move on to another one and on to another one and so on. And so in thinking about that then, I just wanted to talk about a couple of those. So this first one, do to others as you would have them do to you, or do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You know, the golden rule. Everybody knows the golden rule. Everybody on earth, I think, knows the golden rule. And so this particular thing has helped me a lot. This saying has helped me a lot in hospice. You know, in hospice, I find that what happens a lot of times is when we get to become close to the family and to this person who is dying, a kind of bubble of relationship develops. You know, it's a very, of course, sad but very intimate time often for families, and you know, hospice workers come in, and of course we want to help, and so you know, we're kind of putting out, we're opening ourselves up. They're open to us, and this kind of bubble of relationship develops. And I always feel in that moment that or that time that people, they want, or they need something from me, and they don't necessarily know what it is, and I don't know what it is either necessarily. It's some piece of humanity, it's some piece of spirituality, it's some piece of identification with what they're going through. And when I first started in hospice, a lot of times I would come away from a situation with people, and I would feel like bad. Did I do it? Did I not do it? Was I helpful to them? Was I not helpful to them? And so I've started to approach it as I think maybe Jesus would approach it. And I've thought, okay, before I go into this bubble, I want to center myself. Can I do for this person and their family what I would want done for me? And then when I come out of that situation, kind of the same thing. I ask myself, did I do for this person what I would want done for me? In fact, this has become for me almost kind of a daily examination. a lot of times in the shower, I'll think about the day before and think, okay, how did things go? Did I do for people what I would have wanted done for me, and so on. And then I picked this other saying, turn the other cheek. And of course, we all know the whole story. You know, Jesus says, somebody strikes you on the right cheek, turn to them the other one, and let them strike you. And I think a lot of times people think about this as, you know, like take a beating for Jesus kind of thing. But if you're familiar with the late theologian Walter Wink, he had a very good take on that. He understood this saying, to turn the other cheek, as being a way to speak truth to power. So this is how Wink talked about it. In the ancient world, you know, your two hands had real social capital. And I'll apologize ahead of time to the left-handed people in our group, but right hand was a good hand, the left hand was a bad hand. You use a right hand for eating and left hand for other biological functions. And so in the ancient world, you didn't touch somebody with your left hand. To touch them with your left hand in any manner would be to bring shame upon yourself. You only would touch people with your right hand. And secondly, when in the ancient world, when you hit somebody, you know, you would reveal where each of you fit in the social structure. If you punch somebody or hit them open-handed, this indicates that person is your equal. But you'd slap or backhand somebody who is your inferior. So to slap somebody on the right cheek means you have to backhand them. And so when you turn then to your other cheek, that person has a choice. If they want to treat you as an inferior, they have to use their left hand, which is shameful to them, or they have to open hand slap you or punch you, which means treat you like an equal. And so Wink was, you know, saying, or Jesus was saying that, you know, when you encounter, you know, oppression, act in such a way that you speak truth to power and cause people to look like, or cause the power to look like what it's actually is. So I thought long and hard about trying to find a way to illustrate this a little bit more practically, because I think this is a harder one to live out. And I honestly picked it for this reason. I think it's easy to take the teachings of Jesus and miss the power that he would have us bring to the world in which we live. But this one really calls us to bring the power. So anyway, all that to say, I did think of an incident, and I'm not sure where I heard this. I didn't witness it, but somebody was in the grocery line. It was a 15 items or less line, and they had like 30 items. And the checker said to the person, so this is the 15 items or less line. Which 15 did you want? Because that's all you can pay for. And so maybe that's kind of silly, but maybe you get my point. So I have a feeling that I just went through that whole message in about 7 minutes, and I apologize if I talk too fast, but that's I hoped at this point we could move into the conversation, maybe talk about applying the teachings of Jesus in a little different way.
Bob, thank you so much. This is Julia. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm trying to switch from phone to laptop so I can see everybody. I'm on my way. In the meanwhile, thank you so much for your insight, Bob. First of all, I can't wait. I've seen Chimp Empire every time I sign on to Netflix, so I can't wait to watch it. Very much looking forward to that.
Yeah.
During most of your sermon, I was thinking about my own experience in AA. I am a grateful recovering alcoholic, and I thought so much about you know, a big part of this program is to be able to identify the behaviors that we use in order to survive. And those behaviors are survival instincts. They, over time, they become warped. And once our instincts become warped, they become defects. They become, you know, the things that hold us back from the light that you referred to. And so the goal, I love what you said. I took so many notes. You said the golden rule, do unto others. And then you said, did I do what I would like to have done for me? And I think another way to look at that question is, did I do what I can do? Did I look at what makes me special? What makes me the gifts that God gave me? Can I first identify what they are? They are the opposite of those defects. They are, you know, identify what they are, identify how can I use those gifts in order to contribute to the stream of life, you know? And so I think if we think of it in that way of giving of ourselves, it creates connection. And that's, I think, the next level that you were talking about. The next level is connection. And during the reading, it said the mourning, something about the mourning is humanity. We are all mourning, you know? I found it so interesting, your whole talk. It was great. Thank you so much. And I would love to hear what my partner in crime, Diane, has to say. Diane, I'll pass it on to you while I try to get on my laptop.
All right. Yeah, thank you. Thank you both. A wonderful, wonderful morning, I think. The leap of consciousness, the change of consciousness made me think again, yes, of that connection. And a line of a poem from W.H. Auden just before the Second World War: "We must love one another or die." And that seems to me, that speaks of a change of consciousness. It's not my survival, your survival. It's our survival or none of us. And that's, and there's a poem. I'm going to take a little time to read this poem, but it's a beautiful poem, I think, that someone just sent me last week. But it speaks to that. What do we need? Well, let me just read the poem. You can say what it speaks to. It's called Taking Sides. Today, I'm taking sides. I'm taking the side of peace. Peace, which I will not abandon, even when its voice is drowned out by hurt and hatred, bitterness of loss, cries of right and wrong. I am taking the side of peace, whose name has barely been spoken in this winnerless war. I will hold peace in my arms and share my body's breath, lest peace be added to the body count. I will call for de-escalation, even when I want nothing more than to get even. I will do it in the service of peace. I will make a clearing in the overgrown thicket of cause and effect, so peace can breathe for a minute and reach for the sky. I will do what I must to save the life of peace. I will breathe through tears. I will swallow pride. I will bite my tongue. I will offer love without testing for deservingness. So don't ask me to wave a flag today unless it is the flag of peace. Don't ask me to sing an anthem unless it is a song of peace. And don't ask me to take sides unless it is the side of peace. That again, seems to be a way to a different sort of consciousness of survival.
That's wonderful. What's the name of that poem?
It's called Taking Sides, and it's written by a rabbi, Rabbi Irwin Keller.
Thank you.
Yeah, and
Thank you so much for sharing that, Diane.
Others, what would others like to share?
Bob, I thought that was so beautiful and so timely. Like it just felt like the moment. I mean, it's so like the last 3 weeks. I think we're just being like feeling this sort of endless loop that we seem to be stuck on. Like we're just going round and round in circles, like fighting the same fights, sort of refusing to recognize the humanity of people that we've always refused to recognize their humanity. And I mean, we're so clearly like screaming out for some kind of evolution, some kind of big leap forward. Like just, it was funny, like my husband and I were watching a different Netflix series last night about the El Dorado, which was the LGBTQ club in Berlin in the 30s. That was, and it's just sort of horrifying how it's just the same thing over and over again. Like in the 30s, like, you know, gay people, trans people, communists, like they were all blamed, Jews, and here we are again.
Yeah.
Having book burnings, blaming trans people for how is it their fault? So I don't know. I was really, I loved what you had to say, and I just want to say thank you for it.
Yeah. Did you say that documentary is called El Dorado?
I think so. My husband just pressed play. I didn't actually see what it was called, but I think it must have been called the El Dorado. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, fine. Thank you for that.
Yeah, your message was so timely. I mean, it was such the perfect time to hear that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Caroline. That was great. I also wrote down, so we have a lot of watching on Netflix to do after today. Yeah. Okay, I have Constantina.
I
Love
think
to hear
someone had their hand raised
from
before
you.
me, but anyway, I just wanted to say, Bob, I so appreciated that. And especially the turn the other cheek part. I don't know that I've ever heard it interpreted as you presented it, which gives me a whole new perspective, because loving God with my whole heart and soul and mind and my neighbor as myself is like my daily mantra as well. But
Yeah.
the turn the other cheek, I've often kind of looked at it as if, my enemy did something wrong, and, I'm going to turn my cheek and not kind of get back at him. But what you did for me is help me not see him as my enemy, but as my brother. You know what I mean? And so it really did give a whole new beautiful perspective that now I have to incorporate into my daily, living. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Constantina. I apologize if my signal comes out, guys. Diane, you're my second, yeah? I'd love to hear from anyone else. Any other hand? Margie, I see you leaning close into the screen. I know you have thoughts. Let's pull them out now, please.
Is raising her hand. Let's have her go first.
Who is?
Brigida, is that how did I say her name right?
Brigitta.
Oh, Brigitta. Okay, there you go. I didn't see your hand.
I'm looking for the raise your hand thingy and I can't find it.
And I can't see it, so it's all good.
Sorry about that. But I wanted to say that I was very intrigued, but also really happy to hear what Bob Harper had to say, because I've been thinking this for quite some time, that we really need a big shift in the way things are going and the way things are, because the old systems that we've had are not serving us well.
Yeah.
In politics, I just don't think the two-party system is working for us anymore. But in religion, which is more what I think about, is I've been thinking that that the Lord's Prayer, which has, to my mind, nothing but perfection in it. The phrase, "Your kingdom come, your will be done," is something that I really focus on almost every single day. And it occurred to me years ago that if there was some way to get every human being on earth to also think that our whole society, our whole being would be different.
Yeah.
If everybody would pray, your kingdom come and your will be done. If God's kingdom would come, all the bad things, all the um, rotten ways that people treat each other would be gone. And if we could focus on, your will, and I think about that, it's like, what would God's will be, and a lot of these things don't make the grade.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I like the things that you said. I'm not trying to negate those. I'm trying to add to it.
Yeah, yeah, that's how what I hear you doing. It's wonderful. I love that. I love the Lord's Prayer, the Our Father, whatever we want to call it. I love that. And one thing I love about hospice, I get to say it many times with people because we have so many Catholics. And I was at a little rabbit trail. I was at a facility yesterday, and I was just working with a woman she has diminished cognition, and but she's a Catholic, and so I started to say the Our Father. She repeats it, and all of a sudden everybody in the house is saying it with us.
Uh-huh.
But that particular part of it, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. I think that's so powerful. Thank you.
Absolutely. I also I had a thought, Brigitte, when you said, you asked about, because, when we have those questions, why are these things happening? This couldn't possibly be God's will. Why? I think back to, if we had no problems, if there was no calamity, what need would we have to lean on each other? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that powerful kind of a connection happens when we carry our brother through, these kind of atrocities. Unfortunately, it's like we have will, and God's will is for us to, I swear it is to connect. And if these tragedies or any kind of suffering wouldn't happen, that's why you make that phone call when you're struggling. You're sitting struggling by yourself. You reach out to somebody else, either to find out how they're doing and ease their burden, or maybe you have something on your mind that you need someone else to carry your burden for a little while, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyone else?
And another way that I look at what you just said is also that, the world isn't, perfect. And so there's always something happening. And I feel like in a way, this is God's little test to us, is how I kind of look at it. I think if there were no problems, there'd be no way to look at a person and say, what are you made of? But if there's problems, and you have to use your faith and your mind and your body to handle something, that says something about the person that you are. And I think, God looks at, what do you do when a neighbor calls for help? Do you step up to the plate, or do you go back to bed?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
busy?
And what can I do to be of service? What can I do to help this person? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Matt, I see you're unmuted,
Yeah.
ready to go. What are your thoughts?
Bob, the conclusion of your talk got me thinking about a book that probably will come in the future called The Art of Subversion. Because I guess that's what I see Jesus really teaching through that story of turn your cheek. It's a subversive act. So I guess you can summarize that by truth to power. But I'm curious to continue that legacy. What do we need to know, and how do we apply that? I guess I'm still, maybe others are like, how do we actually do that? How do we actually follow Jesus in that way? It is an art, it is a craft, it is something that we have to have mindfulness towards. We have to understand circumstances, and I'll say in the Kingian nonviolence way, we have to understand what it means to hold the tension of nonviolence. So I guess yeah, I'm curious, what does it look like, or what do we need to know, and then how do we apply it?
And you're asking everybody that question, right?
You, I guess, as the person that was bringing that to us, because I
Okay.
you have some
Okay.
insight on it. But I mean, yeah, I'd open it to
Okay.
everybody.
Yeah. No. Okay. No, I think it's a really good question. I think it's a really hard question. I mean, when it comes to like turning the other cheek, as it was described, the most vivid example is the civil rights movement. Is Dr. King and nonviolence, and thinking about how he grew into that, at least according to what I've read, is interesting, and is motivating. But your question really was more about, like, in my everyday life. I'm not leading a civil rights movement. How do I speak truth to power, or how do I subvert? That's really the question, right, Matt?
Yeah, because not everybody's
Yeah.
going to be a leader of a movement. Not everybody has those skills, or is even meant to do that. So how do we do that in our every, like, how do we do that? How do we follow Jesus?
Yeah. I think it's not necessarily easy to do, because it's hard to define. But I think one way that we could think about it is this: there's more than one power structure that needs the truth spoken to it. So in Dr. King's case, that power was embedded in the political system of the United States, still embedded in that political system. But there are other powers at work also. Poverty is a power. Racism is a power, oppressing people, and that needs truth spoken to it. And so maybe one way is, in where we find those instances, stepping into them with courage and compassion. Maybe that's one way. Maybe sometimes another way is, maybe we work in an environment where we have people who are being taken advantage of, and maybe we do all we can to bolster those people, or to help them overcome the oppression that they are facing. I think anytime, let me say that a little bit differently, because I don't want to say what I'm going to say like I'm some kind of authority. I feel like a weakling before this call of Christ to turn the other cheek in such a way. But I guess I lost my point. I'm sorry, but yeah, I think those immediately come to my mind as a couple of ways that we could do that. Does that help?
Yeah, give some context for people. Yeah.
I once saw a counselor who was asking me about something, whether or not I had complained about something, and I said no, because it doesn't do any good. And he said, "Oh, wait." He said, "You need to speak your piece, and if the other person doesn't honor or acknowledge or react to it, that's on them. But he said, if you don't speak up, it's on you."
Ma'am. We have Roy who wants to chime in. Roy, how are you?
I'm good. I'm thinking a whole lot about a lot of this. I thank you, Bob, for citing Walter Wink. He goes on and talks about other ways of resisting power in nonviolent ways too that are interesting. That's another story. The piece, one of your other observations, Bob, was this question of how we envision God, how we define the divine. And my daughter did her master's degree work looking at how religion contributes to the formation of a civil society. And for her master's thesis, she did a curriculum called Six Degrees of Separation, where she talks about the major religions in the world and how they envision things. And she had a workshop this week that she did with a group of Jewish psychological counselors. And she started with the statement that theology is of central importance, that everything stems from how one experiences and defines the divine. And they talked a lot about that. And you know, it becomes a piece that plays out in so many ways, and we have to be careful. One of the counselors said, don't all religions start with the idea of loving everyone? And she said, absolutely not. They do not. I would bet that there are at least many of the leaders of Hamas that believed they were doing God's will and helping to bring about God's kingdom by committing the atrocities they committed. Equally, there are many in the Jewish government who believe that they are doing God's will by shutting off Gaza and bombing Gaza. So we have to be careful when we say, well, if only everyone would work for God's will, then everything would be good. Because everyone doesn't envision God's will in the same way. Everyone doesn't define the divine in the same way. I don't know where that leaves us beyond trying to live out what we hold as the image of the divine one, and trying to live in that context. Yeah. But it's a tricky thing to wrestle with.
Yeah, I'd like to say something about that. That's very interesting, Roy. I mean, everything you said, really interesting, and your daughter's work. I'd love to read that. But what I wanted to say is, so talking about Islam and talking about God's will. So, in Islam, as I've heard it described, there's, that word kismet, like it's God's will. And I always kind of thought that maybe they understood that in kind of a Calvinistic way. Like, Calvin, seems to me, his idea was that God, before the creation of the world, put everything in place for the elect. They're going to go to heaven. They can't help it. It's going to happen. It's all God's will. And I kind of thought it was like that, but I talked to an imam a couple months back, really a wonderful person and an enlightening conversation, and he described it more like it's a resignation of obedience, rather than saying God is directing all these things. This thing has happened to me. It might be suffering, it might be prosperity, but I'm going to follow it as obedience to the will of God. It had a much more generous kind of way, and so maybe, and I guess I'm stepping into a wildly idealistic idea here, but maybe if it were possible to, have some kind of forums where we could talk about that. So what does that mean in Hinduism? What does that mean in Buddhism? What does that mean? In Islam, what does that mean in Catholicism? What does that mean, and so on. If we could compare notes, we might be able to say, like hearing that imam speak that day, I didn't forsake my idea of God's will, but I certainly adopted some of what he had to say. I appreciated the humility that came from his perspective.
But of course, Islam is not monolithic either.
Right. Exactly.
We can find one imam who sees things in one way and another who would see it in a completely different fashion. And we have to be aware of that. Just like Christianity, as you're talking, you mentioned Calvinists. I won't tell the whole story, but I ended up sitting with a woman who was a staunch Orthodox Calvinist on a
Uh-huh.
plane. And we got talking, and she said, my brother is gay. He was born gay. God created him gay so that God can send him to hell.
Oh,
Right.
Wow.
Yep, that's
Wow.
Calvinism.
And at the end of the discussion, she looked at me and she said, we don't worship the same Jesus.
Wow.
And I said, you are absolutely correct. We do not.
Wow. When you started that, I thought it was going to end a little differently.
Yes.
Yeah. Hoped it was going to end a little differently.
Yeah, yeah. Wow.
And the really heartbreaking part was she said, and I'm okay with that. God can do whatever God wants to do.
Yeah.
wow.
Linnea has
Ah,
had her hand up
yes,
for a
ma'am.
long time.
Linnea, thank you for being patient.
I'm experiencing how invisible a brown hand can be, I guess. All right. Yeah, as I was thinking about this thing I wanted to say, so many other things came up. I'm going to try to condense them really quickly. So many ideas, Bob. And you said humans are tethered to the same survival instinct. We cannot stop trying to protect ourselves and our
I lost everything.
Yeah, and expanding our territories and holding on to our territories.
Yeah.
And really, that is a power that we need to speak truth to. But there are two ways to do that. And, you know, the most obvious that we're seeing right now is wage war. But there's another way to hold on to our territory, and that is through complacency, doing nothing. So how do we overcome that complacency? And as you said, Bob, it's about community. It's about somehow overcoming those lines. We've got all these individuals and small entities that care so deeply. We need to somehow not blending or diluting our own belief systems and religions or what have you, but working together to say something and do something. I posted in the Facebook pages of 3 churches, Jesus Collective and New Covenant Living, but it's there, and it's a letter from Christians in Palestine, a whole bunch of them. I don't know if anybody had a chance to see that, but it's a letter saying, where are you, United States and United States allies, North America, where are you? We need help. Please help us. And it's about a 4 or 5 page letter. So yeah, that's all.
Thank you for that, Linnea. All right, we have, make sure to check that out on Facebook if we haven't already. Caroline, we're just going to take a quick comment, and then I believe I need to pass it to Kenichi for communion. All right, Caroline.
Actually, my comment's going to be on Wednesday. We're not actually hearing from Kathleen. We're hearing, so I'm wondering if everybody wants to meet and continue this conversation then, because I feel like we could talk about it for hours. So, and people here who haven't come to a Wednesday night, it's really fun, and it's the same Zoom link at 7 p.m. So, drop in. I think we could talk about this for hours. Frankly, I could.
Thank you for that, Caroline. It's like every Sunday we could talk about whatever for hours, right? It's great. So it's great that we continue the conversations on Wednesday. All right, I will pass things over to Kenichi.
Hi, everyone. Bob, thank you. And thank you for the conversations. Just one other layer that I just wanted to throw out, not to answer that question, but I think it's also important to also bring in the other worldviews, other people groups, from East Asia, South Asia, Central, South Latin America, and other places, and even indigenous people. I mean, what we are talking about, how would they process all this? about survival instinct and so forth. But I'm just saying. But oh gosh, one thing I would, as we approach the elements for communion today, Jesus' broken body and shed blood. Again, as we have indicated here on this platform, what I am coming to believe more and more, one of the things that the crucifixion of Christ, that Christ was preaching, if you will, in action, was the whole absurdity of human violence that have continued throughout the ages and still continues. The survival instinct that Bob had indicated, and how love